Dr. Rassie Erasmus and the Springboks will be delighted with what they saw in the Six Nations Week 4. And in this episode, you are going to get a front row seat as to why that is the case. I'll assess all three matches and give you the updated standings and fixtures for the final week at the end of the episode as well. But let's start at the logical point, and that is at Twickenham, where England hosted Italy. Some might say England roasted Italy. Now remember, the Springboks faced the Italians in 2 tests in July, and the Boks coaching staff are keeping a keen eye on the Azzurri, and so am I. But not for Rassie, for you guys. So this is what I noticed. Italy started slowly against Scotland at Murrayfield. They were slow out the blocks against Wales. Same story against France in Rome. And yet again here against England. Took just 3 minutes for the Poms to take the lead.
There goes Willis Armstrong, a long reach of the arm, and they have the score.
Now, to their credit, they fought back nicely. That's a great team trait, by the way. But then their defence let them down really badly here for England's second try.
Freeman takes it, and he's got another score.
I think it's fair to say they were caught napping. And it's a shame, because this team actually has a lot going for it. Anje Kapuotso is an electrifying player in my view. And by the way, the man finishing this off is Ross Vincent, the 8th man. That is some serious gas. And look at this from Sebastian Negri. They were, however, again exposed at the line-out in terms of their defensive maul ability. It's virtually non-existent. I mean, it's so bad that for a fun experiment, the Springboks could literally make their game plan kicking for touch, trying to get lineouts close to the Italian try line, and then going for the steal or hold in the case of a penalty or 50-22, and then maul them over. 5 points at a time. It's that poor in my view. This Italian team is probably the best we've seen in the professional era. I swear, if Tommaso Menoncello and Nacho Brex were South Africans, they'd be Springboks. If they were New Zealanders, they'd be All Blacks. That is how good they are. Kapuotso, I believe, would be an All Black, but maybe not a Bok, because I think that our defensive coaches would be asking more of him than the Kiwi regime would. But that doesn't mean he couldn't work on those deficiencies and adapt and be successful. Look at Apelele Fassi last season. Rassie told him if he wants to be a Springbok, he has to be better on defense. Now look, Fassi's never going to be a Damian Willemse. I mean, let's face it, who is? But he needed to at least be reliable at the back. And he was last year. Now throw in what he gives you in attack, and his flair, and you've basically got a Willie Leroux. Yes, I know, Apelele doesn't quite have the vision that Willie has, but who was going to pick Leroux ahead of Fassi last year? He more than justified his place in the side, and he's only going to get better. And I think this Italian side only gets better if it gains more confidence. Their problem is that they pretty much only play against teams that are better than them. So that's the Six Nations at the start of the year. And then in July and November, they mostly play teams from the Rugby Championship. So losing 90% of the time cannot be good for morale. Obviously, this is a new breed of team that they've got, a new breed of player, you might even say, when you factor in the development programs put in place by Conor O'Shea, and I would like to throw in Franco Smith's name there as well, in terms of helping and aiding the development of the Italian game. And now we're seeing the likes of Kapuotso, for example, that have now come through the system, and they're part of the setup. They've made incredible strides. They really are much better than they were even 4 years ago, and certainly chalk and cheese compared to a decade ago. But they need some wins. Right now, out of the big boys, they seem to be able to push for 40 minutes and then fall away. They did well not to capitulate against England, it must be said. But the English had already wrapped up the contest, I felt. So that's Italy's next big challenge. Going from a talented team that looks good, especially on attack, and is capable of pushing teams for a while, to being a team that can genuinely upset the apple cart on a regular basis. And frankly, to that end, I think the Springboks are looking forward to the July tests. There's nothing to be worried about. There are things to look out for, like Menoncello, Brex, and Capuozzo's skills in the backline, and the Italian scrum, which I rate highly. But there's nothing to be worried about, if you understand where I'm coming from. As for England, I think there's cause for cautious optimism. I work with a lot of Englishmen who are very despondent about their team. They've used 4-letter words to describe the state of play. I don't think they need to be going that far. There's something brewing here.
On there too. Tom Curry, the offload to Marcus Smith. The step from Smith. And Marcus Smith is back.
I said it in my last episode about this topic as well. There is enough to like about what's going on. England have a good pack. I think the front row is solid. And in Cowan, Dickey and George, you likely have 2 British and Irish Lions hookers this year. Moro Itoje is a formidable opponent and excels in getting in people's faces, which is exactly what you want. Ollie Chessum is a giant. Tom Curry has been one of the standouts in the Six Nations for me, despite all the Witkant, Groenkant jokes that you may have heard on this channel or on X. And I'm also a fan of Ben Earl. Finn Smith seems to be the answer at fly half, and in Alex Mitchell you have a more than capable scrummy. And then the rest of the backline is pretty decent too. I would single out the Ollies, Lawrence and Slightholme, and also Elliot Daly. And I know he's had his detractors, but having Marcus Smith coming off the bench is hardly a bad thing. Yes, the rugby hasn't always been pretty under Steve Borthwick, I grant you, and the results haven't necessarily been there either. But you need to understand, I look at this through a very non-emotional manner. If you're an Englishman, if you're an England fan, it's only natural that you would be very emotional about these things. I'm not emotionally involved here. I'm telling you what I see through mostly neutral eyes. You must understand, as a South African, I'm not a big England fan. I'm sure you can accept that. But I'm telling you what I'm seeing with mostly neutral eyes. I don't think you need to be so negative or despondent. And interestingly, if you had told any Englishman with 1 week to go that their team would be second in the standings and in with a chance of winning the Six Nations, who would have believed it? They'll need to beat Wales in Cardiff, and I think they'll do it. With a bonus point? We'll have to wait and see. I was very disappointed by the way Wales were hammered in the first half against Scotland in Edinburgh as we move on to the next match. The Scots surged to a 28-8 halftime lead. I actually told a Scottish friend of mine at the break that I thought her team were going to put 60 on the board here. I mentioned how poor Wales were in those first 40 and that Scotland were a very attacking side and that the chances were pretty high that the Welsh defence would be opened up and probably carved up in the second 40. But credit to the Welsh. They never went away and kept fighting. That's the one thing I've been impressed by. Whether it was the Warren Gatland gang or the newish bunch under Matt Sherratt, I thought for sure that in the second half it was Murrayfield, or at Murrayfield, it was going to finally fall apart. But they showed incredible guts and determination. I still think Jack Morgan is their only truly world-class player, and I think Will Rowlands and Dewey Lake are the only other 2 Welshmen that can realistically expect to be part of the Lions tour. But as I say, credit to Wales. As for Scotland, you have to wonder where they go from here. This is, by many accounts, their best team in the professional era, much like Italy. You can see that they're good, and they play entertaining rugby. You could say that they're certainly a notch or 2 up from what we see from the Italians, I grant you that. But in spite of that, they still have got a number of limitations. And let's be honest, they're not getting to a Rugby World Cup semi-final, are they? Can you see them winning a quarter-final against the All Blacks, the Springboks, Ireland, France? I just don't. I just don't. So what happens next? I'll leave that for the bosses at Scottish Rugby to decide. And then the big one for the week, Ireland versus France in Dublin, and so much controversy. So let's begin by saying throughout this tournament, I've had the feeling that something has been slightly off about the Irish. In the same way that I feel slightly optimistic about what I'm seeing with England, I'm feeling slightly concerned by what I'm seeing with Ireland. Now, it could be a case of them as a team having already peaked, but I do wonder if it's not something to do with the absence of their head coach Andy Farrell. I don't think Simon Easterby has done anything wrong, but I suspect the players maybe just respond better to Farrell than they do to Easterby. In any event, France lost their talismanic skipper Antoine Dupont around the half-hour mark. Now let's just stop there, because the clear-out that led to the injury has been described as horrendous. It also left France coach Fabien Galthié fuming. I think it's fair to say that us non-Irish have been questioning a few acts from Ireland over the years, especially these last few years where they've been very successful. The feeling has been that they often get away with murder at the breakdown in terms of playing offside. Obstruction is another accusation that has been hurled at them. Springbok fans know all about this. We all remember very well, for not necessarily positive reasons, Richie McCaw and David Pocock. I mean, those two men were born offside. You might say Peter O'Mahony was born offside. But the thing that causes the anger is the seeming lack of refereeing of these antics. Now that's one thing, but reckless and wild clearing at the breakdown is another. And this is where the anger has stemmed from in terms of Galthié, and I think a lot of people that were watching that match. This behavior, it's unacceptable, right? Whichever way you look at it. But if it's not being refereed, then why would they stop? If they're going to get away with it, and that's the thing about rugby, and you can talk about the dark arts. Usually the dark arts are things that take place at the bottom of a ruck, where the referee is unlikely to see it. But the Irish, everybody can see what they're doing. Okay, look, I don't agree with it, I don't like it, but if they're going to continue to get away with it and it's not going to be refereed, well, who's going to stop them? And why would they stop? If they can get away with it, why would they stop? But the issue is largely around arriving at the ruck, clearing, wrapping, and staying on their feet. Do we always see this from the Irish? And yes, it's true that you don't always see it from players from other countries and other teams. Players make mistakes. But I think when it becomes borderline perpetual, or even just perpetual, that's when questions are raised. So think of Andrew Porter and Tide Byrne. Did we see that from them? I didn't. And this is the problem for many fans, and now also Galthié. You have to stay on your feet. You have to make an attempt to wrap. That's how a cleaner functions. Now, in the case of Dupont's injury, maybe Angus Gardner, the referee, asked the wrong question. Remember, that's also important. Was the clear-out a clear targeting of the lower limb, as it says in the law? Difficult to say, but I certainly think it was reckless and dangerous. Now consider this. Obviously, a lot of folks are emotionally charged about this. The sport's global poster boy appears to be out of rugby for at least 6 months as a result of a reckless challenge. Should it not, at a minimum, be a penalty? I mean, it's charging in without binding, right? And that's dangerous play. Malcolm Marx might be able to tell us a bit about that too. Remember what the Irish did to him last year. And then they do have this knack, and I think this is possibly for me, this is what grinds me, right? I don't get overly upset about what is quite frankly illegal tactics, because I feel like if the referee isn't going to blow them up, then why would they stop? If they feel they can get away with it, I think this is the 4th time I'm saying it. If they feel they can get away with something that is outside of the laws and they can get away with it, well then good luck to them. A lot of people will say it's not in the spirit of rugby. I question this notion of the spirit of rugby in any event. I think it's a made-up thing. But that's maybe a topic for another episode. The thing that grinds me is this knack of acting all innocent. I mean, they know exactly what they're doing, make no mistake. And not just the likes of Byrne or Porter, but think of how Johnny Sexton would commit virtual murder on the field and then protest his innocence to the referees. But as I say, it's working for them. That said, after Dupont went off, France played as if they were freed from the shackles of having him there in the first place. They promptly romped home 42-27. Louis Bielbiari helped himself to 2 more tries, taking his tally to 7 for the tournament. And what a player he is. It's just a shame that there's this overemphasis and indeed overhype around Dupont. France have some magnificent players, truly world-class individuals. I'd have Movaka, Antonio, Kor, Aldrit, Ntamak, Peno, Ramos, and indeed Bielbiari in a Springbok camp any day of the week. I think France's problem also is that they play off Dupont. Most teams play off 10, but they play off 9. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's no rule that says you have to play off 10, but I think it feeds the monster, the English press monster, I might add. Because I think that the French generally, they just love Dupont for being a great player that they happen to have, rather than telling the rest of the world that he's the greatest player of all time and if you don't agree, you must shut up. And as it turns out, ironically, you might see more magic from Dupont if they played off 10. Of course, thanks to Ireland and their thuggery, we won't be seeing any of Dupont for at least 6 months and maybe even as many as 9, because it is now confirmed that he has damaged cruciate knee ligaments. He's not playing next week, I can promise you that. Right, so with all that out of the way, here's confirmation of the results. Ireland 27, France 42, Scotland 35, Wales 29, and England 47, Italy 24. It means that Les Bleus lead the way going into the final weekend. A win over Scotland will ensure the title for Galtier's men. England could overtake the French with a big win over Wales, and then Ireland will now need England and France to lose or draw to stand any chance. And here are the fixtures for next weekend. It all culminates on Saturday. Italy versus Ireland, that's first up in Rome. That is the advantage for the other two, that they'll know what they need to do. England will get the first crack in Cardiff, and that leaves France knowing exactly what needs to be done in their fixture in Paris against the Scots. Right, so quite a few talking points there. Pick your favourite one and let's chat. The comments section down below is your oyster. And while you're down there, why not opt for a highlighted comment? You can do that by clicking on the Super Thanks button. That's the one that looks like a heart with a $sign inside of it. I promise to reply and hit the heart button on your comment. It will also be giving you the opportunity to make a small donation to my channel, anything of your choice. I'd love it if you would help me out, because I would love to do this full time. And I think the best way to make it happen is to make this channel fan funded. By the same token, I'd love to go to Australia in 2027 and provide you with daily coverage from down under during the Rugby World Cup. So if you want to be part of the action, help a brother out. It starts from as little as $1, that's US dollars, not Belize dollars. Of course, if you're a Rupert, Motsepe, Basson or Ackerman, you're welcome to give me more. You can also just hit the like button down there if you'd like to support me, or you can just spear tackle that thing, and you can also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And if I may recommend another video for you to go check out, it would be an exclusive interview with 2007 Rugby World Cup Springbok team manager Zola Yeye. He revealed some incredible stories from that tournament, including how President Thabo Mbeki wanted to discipline the team despite winning the competition. Check it out over here. And how about a video I did counting down the top 10 Rugby World Cup upsets? That one is over here. Pick one, enjoy it, and I will speak to you next time.